Bernardo beat and terrorized his wife Carla daily. He was a stalker and a suspect in over 19 rapes. Gruesome videotapes were found in their suburban home. Records of schoolgirls kidnapped, drugged, raped, and killed. The first victim, none other than Carla's own sister Tammy. The 15-year-old died just hours after Carla drugged her drink. Then she and Paul sexually assaulted Tammy and left her to drown in her own vomit. Paul brought their next victim home, 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffey, who was tortured, raped, and murdered. 15-year-old Kristen French faced the same horror. Both girls' bodies were found naked, but it took a long time before authorities connected this perfect couple with one of the ugliest crimes in Canada. Van Smyrnis was not only Paul Bernardo's best friend since childhood, but he was there the night Paul first met Carla Homolka and was the best man at their wedding. Joanne is Van's wife, who socialized with the couple and saw Paul abuse Carla. Al was also a friend of the couple, and Patty Seeger was Carla's aunt and the first one to hear Carla confess. Now, Van, you and Paul were best friends.
Yes.
Did he always have this attraction for young girls?
Yes. It all started, around when he was 16, when his mother first told him that that's not your real father. And he had a very rebellious, something happened to him. There was some sort of fight inside him, and he wanted to always have, and from then on, like, he was always looking for older women at that time, before his 16th birthday. And then when his 16th birthday kicked in, his mother told him, that's not your real father, this is your real father.
And then all of a sudden,
it was like, he wanted younger women, he wanted to manipulate and conquer.
Didn't he even have a phrase like a virgin farm?
Yes.
What did that mean? What's that?
Slave farm.
A slave farm.
Virgin slave farm.
He liked virgins, young virgins that he could turn into sex slaves.
Exactly.
You knew about this?
Well, he had mentioned that a couple of times as a joke.
But when you always
it seemed like a joke.
What was he like in company?
He had a silver tongue. He could talk to anybody, any girl, like nothing. It was very manipulative.
Very charming. He could make you. He'd tell you what you wanted to hear. Make you believe anything you wanted to hear. He, I don't know. When I first met him, I was just very young and influential, and I looked up to him as a bigger brother sort of thing. And after that, I wanted to be just like Paul. And
Paul was categorized it as the BBD. He'd give girls the bigger, better deal. He'd wine them and dine them in the beginning, and then eventually he'd turn cold, and he'd get sick and tired of them and want to go off with other women.
You were there the night that he met Carla.
Yes.
What was that like?
We had, that night he had an argument with a girl from the past, so I suggested actually we should go out and have a coffee and talk about it. So we went to a Howard Johnson's restaurant near my house, and we pulled in, and we walked right up, and we saw these two girls sitting in a booth.
How old was Carla at the time?
Carla was 17, and her friend was 17.
And Paul was
23 or 24.
Okay.
And what happened was that these girls were staring at us, so we went and sat down, and the girls were, were very talkative.
She was attracted to him immediately?
Yes, there was a magnetism right from the start.
And where did that end up that night?
In bed about an hour later. They were,
an hour later?
An hour later, yeah. We were walking towards the hotel room.
Carla, 17 years old.
Exactly.
And ended up in bed.
Yes.
An hour later.
Exactly.
And then the next weekend,
right,
she invited you and Paul down to her town, right?
Yes.
And after that, they were inseparable.
Yes.
Okay. And did he change at all after he met her? Did she change at all after she met him?
Actually, he didn't change. He was still a party kind of guy. He had two lives. His girlfriend in St. Catharines, and in Toronto, his party, friends, and other women.
Joanne, eventually you met Carl.
Yes.
You knew her a long time, didn't you? Known her a long time.
Yes.
How would you describe her?
bubbly, outgoing, but very submissive to whatever Pa said.
Talk to me about that. I mean, what does that mean?
We weren't allowed to go out by ourselves. We always had to be Van and Pa with us.
Dad said she was the girl.
He was always afraid that, well, obviously, he'd be afraid that she would say something to me if she wasn't there. So with no phone calls, he was the one that always answered the telephone.
Say something about what? How he was abusing her?
Yeah.
He was afraid that she'd eventually
Did you know that she was being abused?
No signs of
Did you know she was being abused?
Verbally, yes.
It was verbal.
He always called her his nickname, then my little slut and little shit.
He always said that?
Always.
In public?
Oh, yeah, in public.
And what was her reaction when he said that?
Obedient.
It kind of just like it was
Normal. Totally normal.
Slide on.
She never talked about him in any negative way?
Never. Not until after she was arrested, of course, but before that.
Right.
Oh, actually, if she said anything negative about it, there would be negative repercussions about it. Of course.
Finally, she left after she was beaten by a flashy.
I think she was persuaded to leave by her
mother and father.
And she ended up, Patty, at your house, didn't she? And what were the bruises like on her?
She couldn't walk. She had bruises all over her legs. Her head, she made me feel her head, and it was like really squishy. It was really gross. Like, I felt really bad for her at that point.
Did she still love him?
Yeah, she did.
And at the same time, she's at your house, and what's the first thing she wants to do when she comes to live with you?
She wants to go look for some men.
party.
So what's the party? She's battered, she's bruised, she's got bumps on her head, she's squishy marks, hair's coming out, there are bald spots in her head, and she wants to go chase guys. Do you think that she was as much of a victim as she's been portrayed?
I don't think so, no.
Why not?
Well, she's an actress. I mean, she could turn her emotions off just like that. You know, one moment she'd be happy and carrying on, and the next thing she'd be just crying. Like, for no apparent reason. I mean, she fooled a lot of people.
She fooled a lot of people. And so did Paul fool a lot of people. And when we come back, we are going to hear every one of the most sordid, horrific details that were behind closed doors in that house that anyone could possibly imagine. When we come back, the man who found the naked corpse of one of Paul and Carla's tortured young victims. Roger Boyer discovered Kristen French's lifeless body, and he's joining us now on the phone from Canada. Roger, you were out in your car one day, right?
I was driving along and I noticed a combine on my side, like a conveyor belt in the bush. I backed up, get out of my truck, and I started walking in about 10, 12 feet. I went by a big tree, and I was looking at some stuff in that, and I turned by the tree to my left, and I looked down into the bushes, and it looked like a pink carpet to me. And I went to go ahead to go to the combine, and then I said, "Can't be." So I come back towards my truck, and I come down on the feet, and it was a body like this, and I couldn't believe it. And I seen the hair was cut real short, and by the size of the feet and the small hands, I didn't know if it was a girl or a boy. So I turned around, I ran to my truck, and I went to the first farm, and I knocked on the door. A young gentleman answered the door, and I told him to phone the police. I just found the body up the road.
Right. How did they treat you once they got your story?
Oh, once they got my story, they took my shoes for footprints.
You became a suspect, didn't you?
Yeah, I became a suspect as soon as they took my tire tracks of my truck in prints. They took my shoe prints and the boots I was wearing, and then they kept coming back every week and questioning me. I was a suspect for almost 7 months.
7 months?
Yeah. For almost 7 months I was a suspect until she testified against her husband.
Until Carla testified against her husband in court?
Yeah.
Okay. Dan, you were a suspect too, weren't you?
It seemed to be because of the way they were questioning me in the beginning.
Oh, they were asking for semen samples and everything.
They asked him for semen samples?
Hmm?
Yeah, it's
Because why?
well, they wanted to know why I knew so much about him, why I thought that he was a suspect.
They thought it was two men.
They thought it was two men in the beginning.
Didn't they have any idea about Paul?
They did. They had semen
8
samples.
months
They had
before
blood
they arrested
samples.
Paul, I came forward to the Ontario Provincial Police, and I said, and we sat down, we talked initially for the first 3 hours.
Because there had been rumors about Paul Bernardo for a long time, hadn't there? Weren't there rumors about all the rapes that had happened in the Scarborough district of Toronto?
Well, about 2 years before Kristen French, there was a Scarborough rapist running around. And what I had noticed is they put a composite in the paper, and they wrote an FBI profile stating that he's an anger retaliatory person and hates his mother. As soon as I looked at the picture, I go, that's him. Did you ever go to the cops? I went with my brother and my sister. I went to their house, and she said, I'll turn him in, because I wanted to remain anonymous towards this. So my brother's wife went.
They called him in and did DNA samples and just sat on the shelf for years.
With 2,300 others.
They sat on the shelf. They had his blood samples, semen samples. They had everything you need to convict him. They had hair samples, and it sat there and it rotted on the shelf.
Hattie, Carla, when she was living with you after she left Paul and she's battered and bruised, she confesses to her part in these killings, doesn't she? How did she do that?
Well, she didn't really confess to me what she did. She told me what Paul had done. And with Kristen French, she told me that Paul had taken her from the church and he killed her, and that she took part in cutting her hair. Last in hockey, she said that Paul took her from her own backyard, killed her also, and the only thing that Carla really gave her was the Halcyon or whatever it was that she was drugged with, and gave her a teddy bear to hug before she died.
Did she talk about her sister?
No, she didn't.
Did she ever talk about her sister and what she did to her sister?
Not a word.
Everybody, well, you had to understand, nobody suspected her that she was killed. Everybody thought that she died a young girl.
Well, put it this way, did Paul and Carla go to her funeral?
Yeah.
What were they like at the
They
funeral?
were sort of dry. They were to the point where they didn't talk to anybody. We comforted them as much as we could. Paul, he acknowledged you were there, but just kind of went back into his own world. I just figured, he spent half an hour trying to resuscitate this girl, 20 minutes trying to resuscitate this girl, until the ambulance and paramedics got there, and she ended up dying.
Now all of the United States knows about this story. Paul Bernardo is serving life in prison, but with a chance for parole. Carla is serving 12 years. That's it. How sadistic, how brutal were their crimes? Guess what? They even videotaped all their perversive acts, all their perverted acts they videotaped. They even taped their involvement in the death of Carla's 15-year-old sister. The public has never seen these videotapes. However, we will meet two people who did see them. Yes.
Find out how you can protect your family on the next Maury1 show.
We're talking about the picture-perfect couple, Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka, the Ken and Barbie killers. That's what they're calling them in Canada. Their real-life world of bizarre and sadistic sexual escapades exposed to an entire country. Now, Paul and Carla were both arrested for their heinous crimes. Only Paul actually went to trial. Carla cut a deal. She got 12 years in prison before she ever testified against her husband. Dr. Nancy Lands is a clinical psychologist who covered the trial. And Susan Spitoni and Tina Danzer were jurors for Paul Bernardo's trial. You viewed the tapes, didn't you, Susan?
Yes.
Could you watch them without turning away?
No.
Why? Tell me about them.
The videotapes, I thought I knew what I was in for, and that wasn't the case. They were vicious and horrifying. You could watch the most gruesome movie and not. They showed a lot of girls actually being assaulted, but specifically Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French and Tammy Homolka, which was 3 girls that died. And we saw the sexual assault of Tammy Homolka, Kristen French, and Leslie Mahaffey.
You saw on videotape the assault of Paul on Tammy, Carla's 15-year-old sister.
Yes, Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. Both were on videotape.
Carla assaulted her as well?
Yes.
Sexually?
Sexually assaulted her, yes.
And wasn't there at a time she turned to the camera? Did somebody turn to a camera during all this?
Yes, yes. There were spoken words by both on the camera.
And did it seem that Carla was enjoying herself throughout all this?
In the Tammy Homolka videotape, it was clear that she wasn't, that she wanted no part of that. The Leslie Mahaffey tape, Carla Homolka never spoke through the videotaping. And her reaction was pretty bland. If you had seen only the videotape of Kristen French with Paul and Carla, you may have thought differently. You may have thought differently.
Tina, what was your impression of it?
They were absolutely horrible, and it was very hard because you felt trapped. There was no place to go. You couldn't get away from the videos, and we watched them not just once. We had to watch them numerous times, and as time went on, even if you weren't watching, you knew what was coming by the sounds that you were hearing, because not only were they raped, they were beaten. It was just awful.
Nobody in the courtroom was allowed to view the case except the jury, the judge, the attorney, and the defendant. Paul Bernardo watched the case as they were played. What did he see?
I think he was enjoying himself. There was numerous times when either the Crown or the defense was pointing something out on the videotape while he was on the stand, and he would say, "Why don't you play it again? I didn't catch that." And I'm sure
And
he
you think it was
doing
just
that
for his enjoyment?
I do believe that, yes.
What were you going to say, Alan?
I was just going to say that these tapes were not supposed to be viewed by anybody, but, by the general public, but everybody heard it. They played the audio version of it, and I can't understand the reasoning why.
You heard the tapes in court, didn't you, Dr. Lance?
That's right.
And what did they sound like?
Well, when the kids were really being brutalized, they were screaming for their lives. I mean, they were clearly in distress. And there were threats on the tape: if you don't do this right, I may kill you. And these children were just beside themselves.
I think hearing the audio and not seeing the video was worse than hearing the audio and seeing the video. I think hearing the things that were going on and being said was more terrifying than not seeing the video.
Dr. Lance, you think you could diagnose Paul Bernardo?
Well, it's better if you have the benefit of a psychological evaluation where you give him tests. But after having watched him on the witness stand and after hearing so many of the things that have transpired, we can come to some conclusions about what his makeup probably was all about.
And what was?
Well, it's strongly suggestive that he had a psychopathic personality, which is a psychopath is someone who, the hallmark is a stunning lack of conscience, and their game is self-gratification at any cost. And they're the con men of the world. They're the people who rape and plunder and who sometimes go on to kill.
And Carla? Can you diagnose her for us?
Well, there's a division of thought about that. It seems as though that she was victimized to some degree. I mean, after all, she was.
Well, we saw the bruises. We saw the battering that she took. I mean, there were photos of that. We've seen that. It was a famous picture of that. But, so obviously, in one way, she was a victim. But is there enough to suggest that she was also part of a perpetrator as well?
If you ask me, I'm going to say that I think she was. Because a lot of battered women are not exactly, do not exactly present the way she presented. I mean, usually they're very meek. They don't usually participate in crime, let alone murder, or they're not present for it. And if they have any anger or if any killing goes on, it's towards the perpetrator, who is the battering spouse. And in this case, she worked in tandem with him. And not only that, she could have drawn the line in many instances earlier on, but she chose to continue going on with him. And
but Joanne, who knew her, you think of her more as a victim, don't you?
Yeah, to an extent. I would have drawn, like, you have to draw the line when it comes to her sister.
There's no getting around it. She was a victim. I mean, she had more than enough chance to leave. After her sister died, she could have left. I mean, battered, what?
She left him.
Yeah, but the battered woman's abuse.
She didn't leave.
No, the battered woman's abuse only goes so far. I mean,
But
after
she
his
loved
death,
him.
I'm sorry, I would have left after the first
Don't
death.
you think she still loves him?
She says no. She says no, but I don't know.
When we come back, a woman who was stalked by Paul Bernardo. She could have been another of his victims, but she wasn't.
Its emotional theme has been provided by
I was just wondering from Van, I guess, how much you were friends, how much drugs or alcohol, or was there no, he was just psycho and...
Oh, yeah, he drank a lot, and he was also, from what I remember, in the last 3 months before he got arrested, he was growing marijuana in his basement.
Yeah, but when you guys were palling around, you palled around a long time.
Yes.
Tell me about his social habits. Was he a drinker, mostly?
Drank all the time.
Drugs or no drugs?
Yes, he smoked up a lot. Yes, all the time.
Okay.
And I've heard that he also did cocaine.
Okay.
My question was mostly for Carla's aunt. What kind of family life did she have for such low self-esteem? I mean, you don't sleep with a guy after an hour of knowing him in a coffee shop. What was going on in her family life?
Loved very much by her family.
She was.
They had a very close family, and everybody, like, the parents' life, it revolved around the daughters.
But Van, wasn't Paul upset because he found out that he wasn't the first to sleep with
Very
her?
upset. He couldn't stand it. It drove him crazy.
Right.
So he opted to find another girl who was a virgin.
So I had to do something like that to get involved with this. She's just got to be sick as he is. They both don't deserve to be walking the streets.
No, I think in her case, it falls under the category of the battered wife syndrome. You'll see to a certain degree. Her sister wasn't supposed to die. Her sister was supposed to be a Christmas gift for Paul from her sister.
Yeah, but the thing is, she could have...
Whoa.
She could have stopped.
Carla was supposed to give Paul, as a Christmas gift, her 15-year-old sister to play with.
As a large treat to play with, do what he wants for a few hours. She was drugged. She was given a drug Halcyon. And it was determined that she was given an excess amount that would kill her. She started choking and throwing up on her own vomit. Is what led her
Now,
to
on the phone is a woman named Rachel. Rachel was stalked by Paul Bernardo at the same time that they found the body of Leslie Mahaffey. Rachel, even though Paul Bernardo is behind bars for at least 25 years, you still live in fear, don't you?
Oh, yes, I do.
Why?
Well, I mean, when you're fooled by someone like that, I mean, you don't know what's going to happen if he's going to get out. Like, he will be up for parole sometime. I don't think he'll get out, but it's still frightening what happened. I mean, like, I never got touched by him or what, but I've been followed twice, and I was just so afraid to get out of my car because I didn't know what was going to happen.
He followed you twice?
Yes.
And this was, as we said, around the time that one of the bodies was found. What did he look like? How did he act? Did he try to make eye contact? What did he do?
Yes, he did. He was in the car, and I was coming home one night, and I was at a light, and I could tell someone was just staring at you, like just staring you down. And I was like, I didn't know this guy. And then when he went by me, he just like smiled, and I went by, and I didn't know who the guy was. So I went, and then he did a U-turn. He followed me and to my house and stuff. So all of a sudden, I lost him, and I went into my house. As I was opening the door, I saw him drive slowly by my house, stop, and he was waving to me like to come towards the car, like smiling and stuff. And I just went in the house, shut the door, and just went to bed. And about 2 weeks later, same thing happened. I was going to my husband's house, well, my boyfriend at the time. He followed me again for about an hour or so. I was going through red lights. I was so scared, like I didn't know, because I knew it was the same guy. When I went to my boyfriend's house, he got out of his car. He parked his car around the corner. He was 2 houses down from where I was staying. And I was in the house by myself. Like, I was, like, if I didn't, something told me I had to get in my car, which I stayed in my car until my boyfriend got home. But if I would have went in there that minute, he was like 2 houses down. He was coming to the house. He knew where I was.
So he could have walked in.
Yes, because I was in the backyard.
And grabbed you.
Yes.
The way he grabbed others.
Yes, and that's what I'm scared of. I still have nightmares and stuff. And
well, thank you very much, Rachel. Everybody thought they were the perfect couple, as we said. But why did it take so long to realize that they were really cold-blooded killers?
No, I've never called a psychic.
At their wedding, the beautiful couple, Paul and Carla, I mean, we've shown pictures of this. You know, they rode through town in a horse-driven carriage. At home, the bride and groom smiled for the cameras. They videotaped their sexual assaults against their young victims, seeming to enjoy living out their perverse fantasies. Alan Cairns is the co-author of the book Deadly Innocence. Now, this has been, OJ's been the topic of conversation here, Alan. Has it been that way in Canada on this trial?
Pretty well. There hasn't been any other topic. It's pretty well swept the nation by storm.
I mean, we wanted to do this story during the trial. I mean, you would have thought we were going to commit one of the great heinous acts of all time. I mean, the Canadian authorities are faxing us a memo saying, please don't do this. We have a gag order out. A gag order.
Yeah, well, how it actually happened is Carla Homolka went to trial, pled guilty, was sentenced to 12 years, and there was a publication ban put on the facts that were disclosed at her trial because the authorities didn't want to jeopardize Paul Bernardo's, quote, fair trial. Some take it that the authorities really didn't want to bring too much scrutiny on the deal that Carla Homolka cut with the authorities.
Are the victims' families satisfied?
No, they're not, and I don't think they ever will be satisfied.
Now, they're not satisfied because of what? First of all, we have to understand this. Susan and Tina had nothing to do with the sentence given Paul Bernardo or Carla Homolka. You just come back with a guilt or innocence verdict. And by the way, was that tough to get? Tough to reach?
We can't speak of deliberations, unfortunately. That's something in Canada that...
We can in this country.
It's against the law. It's against the law. That's the only thing.
Maybe we should have that in this country. It's not a bad idea.
Given what I saw on OJ, I think that's...
Yeah, it's pretty good. So you can't talk about deliberation.
No.
Okay. But we could talk about time. How long did it take you?
Just under 9 hours.
Fine. Now, getting back. Is it because of the sentence?
No, it's because they lost their daughters, and in tragic circumstances. And you also have to realize, too, that they're not satisfied with the sentence that was given Carla Homolka.
Okay.
Nor should they be.
Right. Yeah.
I have a question for the friend. If y'all keep in touch with them, do they have any signs of remorse for their actions?
There's been letters that have been published in the newspaper, and there's no remorse from Carla at all.
Quote was, in her letter, I believe it's to one of her friends, that her sentence being in jail was like being away at a country club.
If I can interrupt here, really, Carla is serving 12 years in prison. That's not a short amount of time.
Well, wait a second, though. Is she serving 12 years?
She's only serving 4.
That's not true.
That's not true.
I'm sorry to disagree.
She could serve only 4. It depends, right?
She could be out in full by Canadian law, which allows parole up to 1/3 of sentence. But given the political climate in Canada and the notoriety of this case, and specifically the notoriety of Carla Homolka, that isn't going to happen. She might be out in 8. There's a move afoot by the victims' families to have her detained, as a high-risk offender, and then she would be in for a full 12 years. And I would highly suspect that that's what's going to happen.
And Paul Bernardo, how long will he serve?
Well, he's life imprisonment, which means life. His first crack at parole is after 25 years. We don't have consecutive sentences like you do in the United States. In the States, for example, 2 murders would net 50 years. In Canada, it's 25 years
old. And he could also be called considered a dangerous criminal, and therefore he could serve.
Yes, the government is already proceeding on those grounds to try and have him labeled a dangerous offender, and at that point, his chances of getting out ever are minimal.
She claimed to be a battered wife, a victim at the hands of her own husband. But was she a victim, or was Karla Homolka a willing participant? We'll find out next and get your question as well.
To their house was probably 100 meters away, and let's face it, who believes that your next door neighbor is going to be doing something like this?
This victim, this is for the friends of the victims. Friends of
Bernardo
Karla. I can't understand how you wouldn't have known, being that you were so close to them, and you went out with Paul.
I turned Paul in 8 months before he was arrested, and I kept on pleading with the police calling.
I got $1 for every time I heard that.
Well, you've heard it, but okay, answer for it. Answer for it.
I've lost jobs. I've lost friends.
You're right there. Why didn't you get help? Tell the parents.
I'm not a cop. I could arrest him.
You say you're tired of hearing that question. Give us an answer.
The cops kept reassuring us that it was not them.
It was not him. And I go,